My name is Laolu Davies-Yemitan, and you're listening to My Brother Podcast.
For the breath of life is the sunlight, and the hand of life is in the wind. That was a quote by Khalil Gibran. My guest today knows all too much about sunlight, the wind, and the whole world of renewable energy. Ken Cowan, thanks so much for making yourself available and joining me. First of all, it's great to see you, brother. I know I saw you not too long ago in person on your birthday, but definitely delighted to have you on as a guest today. So, Ken, let's just go right into it. Why don't you start out by sharing with us a little bit about your background and sort of who you are?
Well, first of all, Lalu, thank you for all the great work you're doing. This is amazing. My Brother Podcast. I guarantee you in a matter of months, it will be all over the place because you're doing great work and giving back, which is critical to the things that we ought to be doing. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Absolutely.
For me, oh, wow, the story goes back to Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, that's where I'm from, Omaha, Nebraska. So I grew up there and loved it. I mean, Omaha was a place I really, growing up, didn't think I would leave. I mean, we grew up in a place where my best friends and my neighbors were all like family. I mean, we grew up in an area where, predominantly most of the African Americans of the state of Nebraska lived in North Omaha. And so growing up, my best friends were the kids I went to school with, went to church with, played baseball with, played basketball with. So that was all I knew. And growing up was great. So, I never thought I would leave Omaha until I came to Houston. And even then, when I came to Houston, I said I was going to be here for a few years. And that ended up being 30 years. So, but growing up in Omaha, I obviously have an older brother who passed away about 4 years ago. I have a younger sister. My mom and dad moved to Omaha from Oklahoma. They moved there to find work. And my dad worked in the packing house, and my mom was a cook. And they raised us to be focused on one, our faith, and two, taking care of each other, which we did. And going up through, lower school or grade school and middle school and high school, I did a combination of public school and private schools. Started off in a public school, kindergarten and first grade, then went to a Catholic school that was right up the street of our neighborhood that really served our community. 99.9% of us were on free lunch and didn't know really what that meant, but we were on free lunch. And now that I think about it, there were nuns obviously at the school. It was a Catholic school, but many of the teachers, it was like a program today. They call it Teach for America Today. That's what we were going through. Folks that lived in our neighborhood would come in to help teach us, and we didn't know. And I did that Catholic school from pretty much first or second grade to eighth grade, and then went to public school, and then went on to University of Nebraska at Omaha, when University of Nebraska Lincoln, and moved my way back to Houston.
Got it. So I know that you don't like to hear this, but one of my references goes back to regarding Omaha, Nebraska, is actually a movie called Belly, where it just so happens we're going through this pandemic, and there's a documentary series on the Rough Riders, which DMX was perhaps the main character in that movie, Belly. And they paint this picture of Omaha, Nebraska, where it's just backwoods country black folks. So I want you to take us back to what your experience was like growing up in North Omaha, Nebraska, and what things were like in the Cowan household.
Yeah, that's great. I get that all the time. So when I moved here to Houston, that's the first question, is like, Nebraska, really? But yeah, believe it or not, and it's our community was, I consider it, it was a safe place. Folks cared. People worked hard. We had a lot of fun. Many of the kids that I went to school with back then, I'm still friends with now. The house that I grew up in when my parents bought in the 1950s is where my mom still lives. Um, so it's a special place. Growing up in our household, again, I have an older brother that passed, and I have a younger sister. My mom and dad worked hard. I mean, they worked really hard. My dad, when they when they moved up to Omaha in the mid '50s, they came from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My mom worked in um, a kind of a they both actually met at Tulsa Linen. It's a place where all the businesses sent their laundry. So they worked in a laundry when they were, they're 18 and 19 right out of high school. And my mom's sister moved up to Omaha and said, hey, told my mom that they need to come up and there's work up here. So when they moved to Omaha, they stayed. And growing up was great. We were poor, but we didn't know it at all. We had, as far as I'm concerned, everything we ever dreamt. We had a great Christmas. We ate well, but I didn't realize that we were poor until I applied for college, and I I got at that time they called it Pell Grants. It was just I had no idea until I started to go to college. But my mom and dad worked hard to provide for us, and they provided guidance and the support that needed. But they also put a lot of responsibility on us at a very young age. So we worked because my parents worked, and so we all had jobs. Whether it's a paper route or whether it's going cutting grass or whatever, we all worked, and it was work that supported us. Like that's the money we used to do the things that we wanted to do. And so I think that's where my work ethic comes from, is that you're expected to contribute, you're expected to produce, you're expected to be a team and be part of this. No one just sat around. But we really were, and we still are, a very close family. My dad passed away, and my parents did get divorced when I was a teenager. But we still stayed. My dad was still a vital part of our life. My mom and my dad were still very good friends. We still went to reunions on both my mom's side and my dad's side. So it was, from a family standpoint, my parents weren't together as a married couple, but we were still a unit, which was somewhat odd. Now you don't see that often, but for us it was very helpful. But growing up was great. I mean, again, Omaha was a great place to be raised. I learned a lot while I was there, but my friends are still a big part of my life. But I knew when I left, again, thinking that I may come back to Omaha, I realized quickly that I would be going back to Omaha to visit. Again, my mom was there. I still have great friends, but I knew when I moved to Houston, I saw some of the things that I wished we had in Omaha. And a lot of that has to do with, the Black leadership that I saw when I moved to Houston. I just saw that the opportunities were so vast in Houston compared to Omaha. So again, I love it, and that's where my mom's at. I still go up there often. I'm going up there in a few weeks. But it was a special place.
Yeah, you mentioned that you went to elementary school in the public setting, but then you went to a parochial school, I guess, for middle school.
Yeah.
Can you take us through what your high school experience was like after that, and how you made your decision about where you were going to attend college?
Yeah, Laolu, that's a great question. So um, originally in our neighborhood, all of the kids went to pretty much the same schools. There were a few elementary schools, there were a few high schools that we went to. So I knew we all knew each other in all the schools that we went to. So my friends, we really followed each other through school. And again, I went to a Catholic school that pretty much served our community. and it was great, but it really didn't prepare me well for high school. I was an average student. I was a C B student, and so I didn't I didn't get the A's easy. And when I got an A, we were celebrating. That was a big deal. So I was happy to get an A, but I got by with C's simply because I don't think I was prepared going into high school. When I did go to high school, it was it was a fairly integrated high school. Black, white, few Hispanics, Asians, but it was still in the early 80s. And in my case, because I started off with this work ethic so early in my life, I did sports all the way through middle school, but when I got to high school, I worked. And so after school, I would go to work. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. But I didn't do a lot of socializing with games or going to games or was an athlete. I was more the guy that was working all the time. And one thing that I will say now that I look back at my time at Central High School, beautiful school right in the middle of downtown Omaha. Obviously, it was integrated, but obviously we were segregated, and I really realized that even more so after I left. And there's an incident when I still recall when I was meeting with my counselor, and I'll never forget this. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but I totally understand it now. I was thinking about what I wanted to do after high school, and I wanted to go to college, but that wasn't because my mom knew we needed to go to college, or we needed to do something or work or whatever. It wasn't like I had someone just driving me to go to college. My parents wanted us to do something, and I wanted to go to college. And I met with my counselor, and she didn't put college as an option for me. It wasn't like one of the things that, hey, you need to think about these schools. Actually, she said, you know what, you need to, this is where you need to go: Army, Navy, Marines, so it was really, my focus was to go into the military. And nothing against that, because many of my friends did, and actually my son's in the military. So I respect, and that's an option for a lot of people, and it's an excellent option, and we need our military. But that's not, I didn't get an option to do that. But I realize now that those that didn't look like me, they had the full options. And I just realize even more so now how that advice may have been given just to most of my friends that look like me. And so the reason I say that is because that sparked me to do more in the space of making sure our kids, our people of color, understand what their options are. Because you think that it's clear and that it's happening, in many cases it's not. And I was an example of where that was the case. And so after getting that advice, I went home and I said, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to go to the Army. And I just took it upon myself to applying for colleges, applying for financial aid, not knowing what that meant, getting my parents' tax returns, not knowing how to even do that, applying for scholarships, and it wasn't because of my counselor providing that. I had to figure that out on my own. And just by the grace of God, I did. And I was able to get into a university. I got in University of Nebraska on a full scholarship based on financial need. Mm-hmm. And that opened enormous doors for me that I know I would not have had if I didn't go that route.
Yeah, that issue that you just mentioned, it's a matter of exposure, and it's such a critical element of our life's experience. I mean, the very core foundational reason for having my brother podcast, it's about exposure, right? Yeah. Exposing people, not just young people who might be from disadvantaged backgrounds, mm-hmm. but even younger people who are early on in their careers and trying to figure things out. But without the right exposure, without the right influences, without the right information sources,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're just operating in the dark. And so, it's an issue that I'm deeply passionate about. And I'm glad that you brought up just the importance of exposure, which I'm sure we'll talk more about because, in part, you coming to Houston further that exposure. But
Absolutely.
you've got your full ride. I don't know exactly how far University of Nebraska is from Omaha. But I'm sure at the end of that summer, you make your way down. Is Nebraska in Lincoln
Yeah,
or?
yeah. So I went to University of Nebraska to Omaha
Okay.
first. So I went straight there. So I stayed in Omaha, and then in my sophomore year, I transferred to the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Uh, had a chance to see a few championships through that time, and uh, and then I ended up moving back and graduating from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So I did the whole University Nebraska thing between Omaha and Lincoln. But again, that scholarship, not knowing what it was at the time, it really just opened the door to my life in so many ways because I probably wasn't as prepared for college as I should have been. Um, but they provided me the information, the tools, the people, the mentoring, the exposure, just what you mentioned that I didn't have that I needed. And it's just obviously it's a big thing, but it really changes life in a huge way. Generational, you talk about generational wealth and how that's created. That's how that's created. And so it allowed me to see one that education and higher ed in this case is one of many ways that folks can create generational wealth for their families.
Yeah, and so you're absolutely right. The shift in trajectory, I mean, it's almost like a fork in the road, and
Yeah.
your decision to, have a desire for more than what was presented before you.
Yeah.
Is essential. There's a quote that I try to think about, but it's something along the lines of, "I want to eat at the table, not the scraps that were brought back into
Yeah.
the kitchen after the
Yeah.
meal had been consumed." So you end up at University of Nebraska in Omaha. What was the collegiate experience like, and how did you settle on your major?
Yeah, great question, Laolu. So it was great. I mean, I loved. It was probably some of the best days of my life going to um, the University of Nebraska, whether in Lincoln or Omaha. But it was many of the friends that I met, especially in my fraternity, which is Kappa Alpha Psi, are still my best friends. They're my support. They're my allies. They're my sounding boards. You call it. There's 4 or 5 guys that at that time we are still literally best friends. I don't even call them friends; they're brothers of mine. So they're still part of that, and we had a wonderful time at school, and just looking at majors. It's in my case, I ended up. I knew I wanted to be in business, and I think I wanted to do that is because during my time as a kid, um, I worked at I was in a co-op program at high school called DECA. I don't know if anyone's heard that, but it trains you to kind of get into the work environment. It gives you a chance to kind of intern while in high school.
Yeah.
And that was life-changing for me because what it did is I worked at a small store in my neighborhood, and I had a chance to meet so many different people. I mean, I met so many different personalities. I mean, I sold them like, I cleaned up the store. I opened the store. At that time, it was in my neighborhood. We had dogs. I had to feed the dog. So I did all the work that no one else, the adults didn't want to do. I sold candy to the kids. It was just kind of a weird job, but it taught me so much about relationships. It taught me about business because the guy was a entrepreneur. He had his own store. We had to count the money. So it just taught me a lot about business. And another thing about this, I want to just back up to this job, is just that I worked with older men. There were like 4 or 5 older men that kind of, one, they worked there, but they also kind of hung out there. That was kind of their spot. And I mean, just listening to the conversations, it was, now that I look back at it, that was a PhD in life. And I never knew that until I got older, and so many of the things that they said and did, and I go back to that. But anyway, that created this environment of just wanting to work with people, wanting to be in business, wanting to learn more about. My degree was in management. My undergrad was in management at University of Nebraska, and my MBA is in finance. And so a lot of that had to do with that co-op, had to do with working at that small store. And it made it easy for me to know that that's what I wanted to go into.
Yeah. And so you finish your undergraduate degree in management. Did you transition right over to go secure an MBA in finance, or was there a particular route you took before going back to get your MBA?
No, it was mine was pretty long span between the undergrad and MBA. So Laolu, what ended up happening is my senior year at the University of Nebraska, I knew I had to find a job. Again, I knew I had to work. It wasn't ever, like I said, working was never an option for us. So we knew we had to do that. So I started looking for work my senior year, and I ended up applying for jobs literally all over Omaha, and then all over the US. I mean, I applied for jobs just to get my information out there and see what would stick. I applied for an internship at the time. It was a company called Enron. It used to be Northern Natural Gas in Omaha. They changed their name to Internorth. And when I applied, they had an internship opening in their gas marketing group. And it was a long shot. I saw it in the paper. Again, this is, a kid just trying to find work, and I'm going through the paper trying to see what I can find. And I applied, and I just remember this day vividly. I was at home, the phone rang, and a lady by the name of Julie Gomez was on the other line, and she said, "Hi, I'm Julie Gomez. I saw your resume, which there wasn't much on it, and like to see if you want to come in for an interview at Internorth." And this was an office downtown, so working downtown was just, that in itself was awesome. And I met with her, and she offered me the job as an intern to kind of just file papers, kind of help with supporting their marketing team. I'm like, I'll take it. It was making like $6 an hour. I was ecstatic about that. And what ended up happening is Internorth ended up merging with Houston Natural Gas in Houston. And the two companies were supposed to move to Omaha as their headquarters. Well, the two companies became Enron. So HNG, Houston Natural Gas, merged with Internorth and became Enron, and ended up moving the headquarters to Houston. And a lot of folks in Omaha did not want to move to big city Houston. And I'm here like raising my hand. I'm ready to go. As soon as I graduate, I'm ready to go. And they created an opportunity for me to become full-time. And I moved to Houston and started with Enron. And then about 4 years after that, while I was with Enron, I started on my MBA at University of St. Thomas in finance and finished it. But that's kind of the story to getting me to Houston. And even when I took the job to Houston, I said, you know what, I'm gonna stay here 2 years, and I'm gonna go back to Omaha. I'll make some money and go back to Omaha and find a job, maybe Mutual of Omaha. I get to Houston, and I'm like, wow. I mean, it was more than I ever saw, in a sense of African Americans in leadership position. At the time, obviously, I was single, so to come to Houston and see so many of my people my age just doing amazing things. Yeah. And then, of course, I met my wife down here, so absolutely beautiful women. And so it was one of those situations where I'm not going back to Omaha in 2 years.
You were.
So that's what happened. That's how I kind of ended up coming to Houston and getting with Enron and starting that MBA.
Yeah. So what prompted the decision? Obviously, you're working for Enron at this point, but 4 years in, What was the trigger point, or what happened in those first 4 years that led you to say, 4 years down the line, now it's time for me to advance my education?
Yeah, and Lolly, so when I started with Enron, again, I started as an intern, and literally I had to, literally work my way up, and doing work that I just had to learn the business. I had to learn. Um, this was completely new to me, energy to at that level.
Yeah.
So I had some awesome mentors that helped me along the way. Really looking and listening and taking in information. Um, and I even some of the jobs that I had at the time, I worked in their gas scheduling group. I worked in um, a rotational shift where sometimes I had to work at night and my sleeping through the days. I knew that was not sustainable for me, but I knew I had to do that. It's not for everyone to work nights and then sleep through the day, or 3 days on and 4 days off. But I knew that I had to do it to learn it. But I also knew it was critical for me um, to get my MBA and to get it into either finance or engineering or something um, with some technology based or science based or math based side. I knew that was critical because I earned my degrees in more business administration, management, marketing. So I knew I needed a STEM. To me at that time, I knew I needed something on the STEM side. That's what made me decide that if I want to grow into this, I needed to get my MBA, and I did. It took me some time to finish up because during that time, life happens. I got married, I had kids, and but it was absolutely critical for me to finish that and get that done. And again, I not a A student, but A in effort, A in relationship building, A in let's set clear goals and let's focus on that. One quote that I remember hearing years ago was that vision without action is a dream, or action without vision is a nightmare. So I had to always figure out how to connect my vision with action and
Yeah.
how to make that happen. And so it was always important to me to anything that I do, if it's a vision, what is the action that goes to that so that you can deliver, so that you can do what you want to do. So
Yeah. So you're working at one of the world's largest corporations
yeah.
in Enron at that time. Uh, what were some of the practical things that were happening? Were when you talk about you were trying to advance yourself, and obviously earning an MBA can confer
Yeah.
benefits in different ways, but that doesn't come for some time. How are you navigating the corporate world during those early years?
Yeah, Lalu, and I go back to the job I had at this small store, and one thing that I learned from that was the importance of relationship building, um, and the importance of being coachable. Um, Again, I was around older men, and I just really listened, and the advice that they had given me, I took it to heart. Um, and that always stayed in the back of my mind, even as I progressed through jobs and careers. But when I was at Enron, um, I I being coachable and listening and learning was constant. It did not stop. I did not pause ever with listening and learning. And so I surrounded my people. I saw the folks that were being successful, and I would either just watch or just become aware of what they were doing, how they were doing it. Over time, I had to deliver on the stuff that I needed to do. So I think over time, folks respected my work, respected my work ethic, my desire to learn. They respected the product I delivered. So at the same time, it's kind of this mutual beneficial relationship where one, you want someone to mentor you, but they also want to mentor you because of what you're doing. So it's reciprocal. So one thing that I think happened over time is I started to build these amazing relationships with people in leadership position who took a taking to me and wanting to help me over time. And I listened. I took in what they were sharing with me. I learned what they were doing, and it catapulted my career at Enron. And the one thing I would say about that is some of the most amazing people I worked with, even to this day, were folks there. I mean, many of them now are doing their own thing in big ways, and we still keep in touch. And those relationships, they matter. Relationships matter.
So you obtain your MBA. What impact did it have on your career? And at the time you complete the program, are you still in Enron, or had you transitioned by then?
Yeah, so it impacted my career. It made a difference because what I did, like I said, I started in energy. And again, I knew nothing about energy at all. This is not what I was planning to do. I thought I would be in banking. I thought I would be in finance somewhere. But I ended up working like the night shift. I ended up scheduling gas across the U.S. And then I ended up, after my MBA, I ended up starting to trade. I transitioned companies from Enron to a company called Dynegy at the time. And I scheduled power throughout the U.S., but eventually I ended up trading. I was a trader for a few years.
Would you describe what scheduling gas means
Yeah.
in layman's terms, and then what it means when you now get to the trading desk where now you're moving commodities?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that you get gas, I mean, what we did was we had a 24-hour dispatch center. It's like just really controlling the movement of gas or natural gas for homes, for buildings, for cities throughout the grid, throughout the U.S. The same way that when you're flying a plane, you have air traffic control that controls all the flights. Everything moves and everything happens. You just know it happens, and you're trusting that someone's doing that work. That's the same thing with natural gas. I would schedule gas to flow from El Paso to San Diego. I would schedule gas on the pipeline to flow from the Houston Ship Channel up to Chicago City Gate. So I would schedule gas through this integrated pipeline of systems throughout the U.S. And I would put in the schedule that other folks would obviously dispatch, but I would be the one that would provide the schedule, how much flows from point A to point B. So I did a lot of the paperwork that would dictate what would flow through the pipeline. So we call that gas scheduling, and it still happens today. That's just how it was done back then, and it's how it's done now. And then trading, which is what folks typically would see like on the New York Stock Exchange, but it's a little different because trading a commodity back at the time I did it was I was trading power. So I was buying and selling power to utilities to across the U.S. So the grid is the power system throughout the U.S. I would talk to dispatching, whether it's at the time Houston Power and Light, or El Paso, or San Diego Gas and Electric, or New York Power Authority. So we would talk to these various entities to schedule power through the grid to serve power to these various utilities. And so we would buy and sell. We would take positions, long-term positions, hedge positions. We would go long, go short, and necessarily kind of bet on where we think the market's going to go and flip out of those positions. So that was truly a finance role that my MBA helped create the opportunity for me to do.
Yeah, I have the fortune of being someone who has some familiarity with that business, but I'm sure our listeners are probably going through and saying, hold on, flip, go long, go short. But it's how all of you energy people create value for your companies and have good lives and careers. So
it's a huge market, and it was a lot of fun. And I think, again, like you said, what did my degree, how did my MBA help me with that? It helped me because of the hedging techniques, risk profiles, just understanding kind of the many of the techniques that I use as a trader. And so I did that for a few years at Dynegy. And again, when I worked at Enron and Dynegy, I really made my circuit around some of the larger energy companies in the U.S. And each time I kind of transitioned through these companies, I ended up one, growing in more responsibility. So what I did from trading, I start to go into, it's a group called Origination. And what we did in the origination side of energy is I crafted energy solutions. And so energy solutions for large industrial customers, energy solutions for either cities or universities or hospital districts who are looking to do sustainability. They're looking at energy efficiency. They're looking at infrastructure upgrades so that they have, they may have a plant that their equipment is maturing and they need to deploy capital to update that equipment so it's more efficiently run. You have folks who are looking for transitioning from coal to wind or coal to solar. So I gravitated towards origination and creating the optimal energy package, you can say, for these types of customers. And so that's kind of what I'm doing now as I transition from, real intern to, scheduling gas to trading to origination and now crafting these unique energy structures for Fortune 1000 companies now.
Got it. So when you're at Dynegy at this point, you're trading. How did you pivot and move sort of through this suite of companies as you described? I mean, I don't presume, people just came looking for you and say, "Hey, Ken, here's the next position." But what were the things that contributed to that, and how did you make the decisions about, okay, this is an appropriate move to make at this time?
Yeah. No, Laolu, that's a great question. I think one thing that I always tried to pride myself in is the work that I did wherever I was at. So one thing is I always worked hard, and I always tried to produce at a level that people, one, would appreciate and respect. And over time, you start to build relationships and people start to know who you are. And so I always go back to relationships matter. So every relationship, every contact, every interaction, to me, I took seriously. I valued my meetings, whether it's a casual conversation or lunch. I value that time and I made it important and made the person felt that they were important. So over time you do that and it's natural for you. So it has to be authentic. If it's natural for you, people start to take interest in you. They start to really see what you're doing. So when it came time to make a transition, many of the times I was looking for a job, many of the times that these opportunities came, I wasn't looking for a job. It was the opportunity presented itself because of the relationship that I had, or the work that I had done with that company. And so I say that because it's so important for folks to understand that there's a huge circle of folks who are watching what you do. You may not know it until it's time for a job opportunity or a reference or whatever. But so many times folks who you least expect are watching how you react to very difficult situations, how you deliver under challenges, how you deliver in chaos, how you work with others, how you interact with others, how do you work as a team. All of that stuff that's people always say matters, does. And many people who around your circle may not say anything at the time, but they take note of that. So when an opportunity comes, they're going to say, you know what, I have your person. And that's what happened. So every opportunity that came was one where someone knew me, or I knew them, or they came and said, "Hey, I hear of an opportunity for you," and that's been a blessing.
Yeah. So after Dynegy, what company did you go to, and what were some of the subsequent steps along the way? And was there a moment or a position that finally made you feel like, oh wow, I'm really making the kind of advancement in my career that can kind of yield this long-term growth and positioning that you desire.
Yeah. So Laolu, after Dynegy, I went to a company called Constellation Energy out of Baltimore. It's like I mean, major utility in the Baltimore area. Um, and I worked there again. At that time, it was doing again more of the structuring of
Mm-hmm.
energy products. So it was I traveled quite a bit at that time, and that was necessary, and it was a learning experience. I think what I had to learn there is that sometimes you got to leave where you are and get on the road. And so I traveled quite a bit with Constellation. But I think the job that really um, I think really I think made a change for me, and I think my career um, trajectory really went off was with PSEG, which is a utility in New Jersey. I worked for PSEG for about 2 years, but I had to commute. I had to work in Newark, so I would leave home on Monday, and I would work there until Thursday, and I did that for probably about a year. And I did that over the winter months. And winters in New Jersey, I thought winters in Nebraska were pretty bad, but New Jersey were tough. And so living out of an apartment, my family is here. It was just a tough time. My kids were at an age where I really wanted to be there, but the experience that I got out of that job and the because I had the time to do it, because I was there, my family wasn't there. I really spent a lot and put a lot into relationships. I put a lot into study. I put a lot into learning. I put a lot into um, creativity and innovation as related to what I had to do. Um, and then I moved back to Houston, where they created an office for me here to lead our Texas um, PSEG initiative, and then they ended up selling part of that portfolio, and that's where I ended up after that going over to NRG, which is the reliant company for those that have been here a while, but NRG, and that's where I transitioned from NRG to ENGIE, which is where I'm at now.
Yeah. So, what did you do at NRG during that period, and what do you do now at ENGIE in your role?
Yeah. So at NRG, it started off as, again, I kind of transitioned to this origination function, creating um, anything related to energy, trying to piece those pieces together for the client. So NRG started what they called a solutions team. And this solutions team, I was a part of the sales team. So I would uh, work with, again, most of the household brands that you have in your house, or, you know, um, any Fortune 1000 company. They're looking for energy, they're looking for sustainability, looking for renewables. So I would create that for those companies. I was in sales. I would go to these clients, talk to their senior level folks, whether it's a CFO or CEO or senior vice president of facilities or chief sustainability officer, and explore, create, innovate on what it is that they're looking to do to meet their energy goals, to meet their sustainability goals. So we would have that conversation, create the roadmap, and then deliver on those products. So if they want wind, we had wind developers. If they wanted solar, we had solar developers. If they wanted electricity, commodity, we would deliver commodity energy to them. If they wanted on-site generation, combined heat and power plants, that in event their power went down, they have the ability to keep the lights on. So I did that as in a sales role for NRG for about a year, and then I ended up leading that sales team for about 2 years. And what I did there is I had a sales team, and that's what we did. I mean, I had a high caliber sales team that focused on selling these unique products to clients. And when you look at the capex associated with that, or the capital, the dollars that go into these type of projects, you're looking at 50, 100, 200 million dollars. So that's the type of deals that are getting done. And so with NRG, it was going great. I was very comfortable. Loved the job, loved the people. Didn't see anything happening with me leaving. And a recruiter called me and said, "Hey, you know what, Ken? I got this opportunity at ENGIE. You got to look at it. And I just literally said, there's no way. I mean, things are perfect for me. Why should I go anywhere? He said, Ken, you gotta you gotta talk to the guys. And I to this day, I still said, I felt so comfortable to where I didn't want to put that foot out. And I'm so glad I put the foot out. It was nothing at all wrong with NRG. It's just that it was a great gig for me and I didn't need to look. Obviously, fast forward, I met with the ENGIE folks and I was just blown away. I was literally blown away. I mean, it's 170,000 employees in 70 countries. And they do absolutely everything plus what I wanted to do. And they wanted me to come over to lead their sale. They were doing a startup within a company this large, headquartered out of Paris, to do a startup. So I'm doing a startup within this multi-billion-dollar company. And they're giving me everything that I need to do it. They're giving me the people, they're giving me the capital, they're giving me the support, they're giving me the roadmap, and I just got to build the team and deliver. And I said, I'm sold. I'm a transition, and that's what I do now. I lead a sales team of folks that for North America that sells these integrated solutions to Fortune 1000 companies.
So, Ken, at that phase in your career, you're at you're in a good place, right?
Yeah.
Things are working well in NRG. And you're also getting a bit more advanced in your career, and to take on a new role it is a startup, notwithstanding the fact you have this behemoth behind you. But there's some inherent risk. I mean, guys at ENGIE and think, hey, it sounds great, but it's still a decision to step out of the comfort zone. So what continues to drive and motivate that decision as opposed to saying, look, I'm at NRG. I figure if I do another X number of years, I've got these promotions in line and I can do whatever my number is and ride off to the sunset.
Yeah, that's exactly where it was. I mean, it was, as I think back during that time, it was probably one of the hardest decisions I had to make because of the fact that I was very comfortable with where I was. And that's one thing that I would definitely say to folks. Sometimes you gotta get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if your personality is, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, you got to challenge yourself sometimes. You got to take some calculated risk. Okay. And what I did is I just really thought through. I mean, I did the list, pros and cons. And I also spent some time with people I trust and said, hey, what do you think? What it was amazing because everyone I talked to like, Ken, what are you talking about? This go. Why are you? But believe it or not, sometimes we feel that, okay, can I do it? Is this really going to last? I know what I have here. And it took a lot. Like I said, my own analysis. It took me talking to folks that I trust who have been successful in what they've done to also give me some guidance. And believe it or not, after I had those conversations, I'm like, wow, yeah, it makes sense. Now that I look back at it now, I'm like, why didn't I make the decision sooner? Again, nothing against that. It was just that, sometimes you're comfortable with where you are and you get opportunities in life that present themselves, but we're just reluctant because we're risk averse. We don't want to take the risk. I know what I have. Even knowing what you have is a risk. Okay. So you just have to, you start to look at that, but that was the relationships, the mentors, the folks that I had to give sound advice were folks that helped me with that decision.
Having been in the energy industry for so long, it's funny when you're talking about, perhaps in the 90s when companies were looking to switch perhaps from coal to natural gas. And now we're in this new era where, solar is almost becoming a thing of the past. It's like, how much more can we do with solar? Because now it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we just put solar here and wind.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about battery storage capacity,
Yeah.
ENGIE, LNG. All of
Okay.
these things are happening where we're, sort of moving into this new era where continuous innovation
Yeah.
has sort of become the standard. What's your long-term view of the industry? And, in a sense, if you were, there's a different question I want to ask about that, but how should a young person view the energy industry today?
Yeah, I think, Laolu, it's, to me, the energy space now is the place I'm seeing so many young people wanting to be in. I mean, I hire folks, I'm interviewing people, we're recruiting, and I for one job, I'll get 200, 300 resumes. Um, Sustainability, renewable energy, hydrogen. I mean, it's continually what's happening, what's driving this is that you have students now who are passionate about saving the earth. I mean, it's not like, hey, this is, I want to do this, or it's something I want to try. This is what they believe. They'll do this for free. Okay. I go to universities. We've done some deals with some major universities. I'm on campus. They're driving the schools and the universities' sustainability plan. They're demanding that they sell off coal assets. And these are billion-dollar decisions that are being made, and students are driving this. So one thing I see is that our students now are fully aware of the energy space, and they're passionate about it because they believe in it, and they want to see a greener future. And so, one way to be involved in this is now, back when I was in school, they didn't have anything about renewable energy classes or sustainability classes, or looking at hydrogen energy, or looking at, you know, uh, trading various commodities in the sense that we're doing it now. But now they do. These are classes kids can take. There's tools, platforms that they can learn. There's even on the regulatory side, whether it's on the finance side, the marketing side, the regulatory side, there's a space regarding energy in so many different ways now. And I think the one thing that folks may want to consider is just really just this classes that are being taught. I mean, there's seminars, there's webinars, and the thing that I see now is that because it's so competitive, that it's good to know folks in the space or in the industry. I mean, there's um, uh, American Association of Black Engineers, ABE, which is a great organization to get kids, whether high school or college, into engineering, energy professions. So there's a lot of sources out there to help folks do that. But another thing is just find out folks who are in it and say, hey, I want to learn more.
Yeah. So if Cowan had a magic wand, we talked earlier about the importance of exposure. And as we're having this exchange, my wife, whom runs a
Yeah.
STEM organization,
Yeah.
been in the STEM space really as an advocate and a leader for nearly 2 decades. And one big issue, almost an intransigent issue, continues to be the lack of exposure.
Yeah.
So if Cowan had a magic wand,
Yeah.
how would we help more young, in this case, specifically Black
Yeah.
kids, get exposure to STEM at an early age? And then exposure to the energy space is another sort of
Yeah.
thing that we're similarly disconnected from,
Yeah.
right? We all
Yeah.
drive cars, we all consume energy in various ways, but a lot of these conversations around sustainability aren't being had by young 20-something-year-olds who look
Yeah.
like mine.
Yeah.
It's folks who come from a different background. So
Yeah.
if you had it in your power, or what are just some practical ways that you think that could be addressed?
Yeah. Laolu, that's it. I mean, you're right. I wish I had the magic wand. I don't, but I tell you what I'm planning to do. Well, let me just say this. If I had the magic wand, I'll tell you that, and then I'll tell you what I want to do. But I wish there were a way for one is this podcast is a great. I hope folks are seeing all that you're doing because it exposes folks to so much in a great way. But I think this is just for folks to hear what's out there, what the stories are that folks just didn't happen to get into this, to whatever their expertise is. It didn't happen overnight. The stories are vast, and probably the most unlikely person to be in the positions that they are them. I mean, there's absolutely no way I could have scripted this. But I just took a liking to energy, and people kind of showed me the way to get there. And I just wanted to learn. And so if I had a magic wand to kind of say, hey, this is what we need to do, is I wish there were more formal or more opportunities for folks to see kind of what we're doing so that they could learn that. I wish there were more opportunities to where we could make energy sexy, because folks want to do all and no one thinks that what is there money even in that? I mean, what do you do? Solar, what are you talking about? Wind, it's amazing. It's a great opportunity, constantly innovative, constantly creativity in the space, careers from legal to marketing to engineering to finance to accounting, you name it, it's all across the board. But I don't think people think of energy as, wow, that's what I want to do. We got to educate our people to see that this is a space that that's growing, and it's a space that really, if you want a career that really can challenge you, and two, you really want to make a difference, and that's important to you, and that's critical, is that this really has to mean something to you, then we need to create. I wish I had that magic wand to create that environment. But one thing that I am doing is starting to do more mentoring, starting to bring in. I'm in a position to bring in interns to have work for me, and I've done that. And those that have come has said, "Wow, I never knew this was energy. I never knew." I mean, you have some of the brightest people in the world with ENGIE. You have people working from around the world, and they're doing big deals that change the entire culture climate of their companies, their universities, their hospital campuses. And so that's one thing that I want to do is start doing more of that.
If Ken Cowan could go back and talk to a 20 or 30-year-old version of Ken, what advice would you offer?
Wow. You know what? I think what I did, like I said, I wasn't the A student. I was kind of an average student along the way. And eventually I got through that phase where I felt I didn't have to be the smartest one in the class. But I think that if someone, for the person that's 20 or 30 or like me, is that you don't have to be the A student. I mean, are you passionate about what you do? Do you love what you do? Do you do what you do with integrity, with passion, with excitement? Do you like to work with others, and do others like to work with you? Are you coachable? Are you likable? Are you willing to learn? Are you willing to be flexible? Are you willing to roll your sleeves up and do whatever it takes to get the job done? There are some qualities that make up quickly for the classroom work. And I wish I had known that sooner, because I was kind of stuck on, you got to be the A, you got to do well academically. But I quickly realized through other people that, you know what, focus on something you love. I mean, put your, put all that you have into it. Be coachable. Be in a position where people want to work with you, where people want to help you. And then when they do want to help you, be on time. You know, if they call you, call them back. If they send you an email, respond back. So a lot of those things I didn't understand how, I didn't go into this, but I remember when I first started in the intern position at Enron, it was the first kind of corporate job I had. And I was showing up, 10 to 15 minutes late. My lunch breaks were a little longer. Someone pulled me over to the side and said, listen, to this day, she's still a good friend of mine. She pulled me over the side and said, you know what, you can't do that. You're going to be out of here next week if you continue to come in late. I never was late again. I never was late. I was early from that time on. But one, I had to be coachable. I had to learn that. But anyway, to go back to, if I had to tell myself 20 years ago, those are some of the things that I would do earlier because I got caught up thinking that I had to be this way and realize, you know what, there's so many other things that are so important that you could focus on.
Yeah. If you talked about mentors, you had some early on. How do you continue to attract mentors as you move through your career?
Yeah. Laolu, I still, to this day, I still have mentors. And I think that's a vital part of just continuing to grow and to learn and to be a better version of yourself, is to be around folks that you could constantly get feedback, honest feedback and guidance on. And so I still, and I think it goes back to people you want to be a mentor, but you want people to mentor you. And that's an important part of it, because so many times you're being approached to be a mentor, but you're kind of saying, well, do I really want to mentor this person? Do they have the drive? Do they have the passion? Are they really open to learning? I go back to coachable. Are they really coachable? And even this part is where I'm at in my career. I'm very humble and say, I don't know it all. I want to learn more. So I still, I've reached out to people that I admire. I've seen their work. I've seen their character. I see how they command a room, how they care, how they are passionate about what they do. And I just say, hey, can we grab lunch? How about we set up a meeting once a month and we grab breakfast and let's talk? And that's in the public side. I do it in the private side as well, with friends, who are, with families. Like, we're an empty nester right now. So how do you balance, being an empty nester, and you're doing it so well? So mentoring goes in different aspects of your life. It's public, private. It may be a couple of guys getting together, talking about business opportunities. Iron sharpens iron. So I really look at mentoring in almost all corners and aspects of my life.
Yeah, here. So what's next on the horizon, or what if I might say, what's that big picture for you, and any closing remarks you might want to offer?
No, Laolu, thanks a lot for this. I think that it's ironic that I'm, where I'm at in my career is probably the most fun I'm having now. So it's one of those deals where you're doing something you absolutely love. It's like, wow, this is great. So really continue to do what I'm doing, but do so in a more open way. I'm really doing more to try to bring in folks that are people of color, African American boys and girls, to learn more about what I do. So I'm spending a lot more time on that now. The other thing, I'm getting more involved in boards right now. So I'm looking at that as an opportunity. Education to me is really, really important. So I'm involved with a independent school board, but I'm looking also at some schools in Third Ward to help and support on that side. So I'm really starting to focus more on leveraging my experiences with kids through strategic planning and boards, but also just really like just sharing what I'm doing and how it's done, so that I can help others, because so much of my life is because of all of my life is because, obviously, the grace of God, but also putting the right people in play to shepherd me through. And I there's absolutely, it's mandatory that I do that and give back and do it authentically, honestly, sincerely.
Yeah. Incredible, man. This has been an absolute delight. You've talked about early on the importance of exposure for you, which to a great degree happened through that store that you worked at through the co-op program, which in those co-op programs, unfortunately, have been taken out of schools. And it was something that we had in Houston. But somewhere down the line, perhaps we can get back to that. But through those lessons, you've talked about the importance of building relationships, being willing to listen and to learn, being someone who, approaches things with a strong work ethic and work with integrity, and being coachable. My guest today has been King Cowan. My name is Laolu Davies-Yemitan, and you've been listening to My Brother Podcast.